My name's Graham. I'm the Hub Manager at Swinburne College. I've worked at Swinburne for the last 5 years. I worked as a teacher and also as a convener, but for the last few years I've been managing the Swinburne Hub, which includes the Student Hub, Student Wellbeing Support and Staff Professional Development. Before that I worked in and around the student experience for many years as a student recruiter, but for the last 5 years I've been here at Swinburne. So I'm from the UK originally. I came to Australia for 1 year, and that was in 1999. Australia was just a place I was always going to visit. I love sport, I love the outdoors, I love the beach, and certainly the beaches in Australia are a lot nicer and a lot warmer than the beaches in the UK. I had quite a few Australian friends I met who told me I'd really enjoy it, but for me it was just somewhere I really liked being. I like the pace of life. I like the fact that there's fantastic nature not too far away, and yeah, they were the main reasons for coming to Australia and staying in Australia anyway. Yes, I'm very happy with life in Australia. I came as a backpacker. I've now got 2 children, so I've got an 11 and 13-year-old. Melbourne and Australia, I guess, overall are great places to raise kids. Where we live, there are lots of parks, the schools are good, there's lots for them to do. So I can't really think of many negative points about Australia. Obviously there's negative things around the world in general, but nothing specific about Australia. Generally it's a pretty easy place to live. My first response is, as a teacher, the age of students is not a factor. And I think I speak for majority of teachers, if not all teachers at Swinburne, that we don't feel any differently if a student is 18 years old, 28 years old, 38 years old, 78 years old. We certainly don't distinguish that. We don't really come across issues that younger students have studying with mature age students and vice versa. Myself, I think I actually did a postgraduate. I did a master's degree at Swinburne in the last 2 years, a number of years after having done a bachelor's degree. Main differences I found was that as a mature age student, I had a lot more idea of why I was studying the course I chose. A bachelor's degree I did straight out of school. It was something I was kind of interested in, I was good at school, but I didn't have any real long-term ideas. With my postgrad, I was very clear about what I wanted to study because it related to my field of work and things that I wanted to do. Now we do have a lot of young students have very clear ideas about what they want to study and why they want to study it, but we also come across young students who are not really sure why they're studying. Sometimes we find students are doing a course they don't really want to do because it's what their parents want for them, whereas with mature age students, generally they've got a pretty good idea of what they want to study and why they want to do it. Now, yes, there are lots of great courses and all students can get a lot of enjoyment out of courses, but when things get challenging, when you've got a lot of assignments piling up and maybe you're not feeling so good, it really helps if you've got a strong sense of purpose and strong motivation. And for me, a lot of mature students have that because they've got a very clear idea how they're going to benefit from this. So all courses will have enjoyable aspects, all courses will have challenges, and sometimes those challenges are bigger than others. There's no single answer for all of the challenges students would have, but there is one piece of advice which I think will cover most things, and that's communicate. So I look after the Student Hub. We deal with students who often come to us for support, or teachers ask us to offer extra support. When we work with those students, the main thing we encourage them to do is to talk. What we sometimes find with international students is that when they arrive, even though they've studied English to a high level at their school or university, when they arrive in Australia, it sounds a bit different. They're exposed to many different accents. The speed at which their teacher talks or classmates talk can be different. So there's A time what I often talk about, if you think about an old radio, you know, when you had to turn the dial and you weren't quite on a station, there's that element of tuning in. But what can also happen is that students lose confidence in this situation. Think, I don't really understand what's happening. My teacher says I can ask questions in class, but I'm a bit shy about this. My teacher says I can go and see them one-to-one outside of class, but I'd be very embarrassed too, because I'd be telling them I don't understand. And so those students kind of go into a panic. They think, well, I'm sure next week will be okay. And it's not. The week after, it's not okay, and you know what? You've got an assignment. So really important to start communicating. If you're not sure about something, ask. You don't have to ask questions in class. It's really good if you do, but at least talk to your teacher outside of class and communicate. The earlier, the better. The teachers won't be angry. But also, something students don't often recognize is, what's life like from the teacher's perspective? So if I'm a teacher and I've got quite a new class and I'm delivering information, and I know everybody's going to understand some of this, but some people might not understand certain parts. So there's a limited number of tools I can use to check. I can ask, does anybody have any questions? Nobody asks any questions. Okay. I can say, all right, so Zoe, do you have a question? And you might have a question, or you might understand, or I can check my understanding as well. Marianne, so you're clear on that bit, yeah? But I can't keep doing that to every student. So if nobody asks any questions, then as a teacher, I've got to make a decision. Okay, well, does everybody understand? And sometimes teachers, we look for, you know, what I would describe as the dog face. You know, if you ever talk to a dog, students do that as well. But if, you know, everybody's looking at me, nobody's asking questions, I kind of got to move on. Now, it would really benefit me if a student said, look, sorry, Graham, that last point you mentioned, that I'm not quite sure what you mean. Could you give me another example? This is really helpful to me as a teacher, because I know, okay, this is the part I need to spend more time on. So it's way more helpful to me to have a question there and then, or a student to email me after class, hey, could you explain that again, or could I come and see you? It's far better for me to understand then that you need further explanation than in week 4, 5, 6 when I'm marking your assignment and going, okay, Zoe really didn't get that at all, and she spent the last 2 weeks doing the wrong thing. So communication is really important. A lot of international students in particular talk about how education in Australia is different. There's an expectation that you talk. There's far more involvement with it. My kids go to school here. From elementary school, they're taught to speak up. They're taught to voice their opinion. They're taught to attempt to answer a question, even if they're not sure it's right. Because if they're not quite right, it's an opportunity for the teacher to work out, okay, this is where they're wrong, this is how I can help them. So I think the number one piece of advice is to communicate. If you communicate with the teachers, talk to them, then most other things can be resolved relatively easily. In the words of Nike, just do it. I think that there's an awful lot to be gained from being a student at any age. Whether you're 18, whether you're 88 years old, there's something in it. And the experience of studying overseas, I think, is something which can be life-changing in a very positive way. Like I said at the start, I think the age barrier or challenges around learning at a certain age mostly are things that are in students' minds themselves. You know, so mature age students can build up far more imaginary barriers to learning than actually exist. And what they generally find is that, no, it's a pretty easy experience. If they haven't studied for a number of years, okay, that's relatively easy to work with. If they haven't written academic essays for a long time, it's not that hard a process to get there. What we often find as well, and again, this is speaking when I was a postgraduate student, a lot of mature age students in the class. As a teacher as well, mature students have often got a lot of life experience or work experience. They've got interesting content they can add. They can add stories about when they've experienced things that a teacher's talking about, a theory. And this can be very valuable for everybody's learning. So it can help their fellow students, it can help the teachers. So yeah, I think that there's, for me, as a teacher and also as a recent graduate, age is not a barrier.